Hello everyone, my name is Mrs. Lanner and I am a teacher on Machal. I am told that I am speaking to the incoming Machal Aleph class for next year, and I am so excited to meet you and to get to know you, and at present to share some words about this week's Parsha. As you know, this week's Parsha is Parshas Teruma. Most of us spend, I would say, most of the time in our lives maintaining and facilitating the relationships that we're in. And I would say that the relationships that we have can be categorized into three categories. Those we have with others, the relationship we have with ourselves, and our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there is a pasuk in this week's Torah that really gives us an insight into the relationship that we have with Hashem and how to make our relationship with Hashem even closer and even better. This week's Parsha begins with the request for Teruma, for contributions to the Mishkan. And what's unique about these contributions is that it is actually an individual request, a personal request. Each member of Klal Yisrael is supposed to give something of him or herself towards the building of the Mishkan. One of which is Atzei Shitim, which is mentioned in Pasuk Hey, and we're going to come back to that in about a minute. But these requests for materials that would be used in the construction of the Mishkan ends with a very famous pasuk, and the pasuk is pasuk Ches, Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. And Rav Hirsch on that pasuk explains that one half really follows the other. Va'asuli mikdash, if you b'nei Yisrael make for me a mikdash, in return, he explains, v'shachanti b'socham, I will then dwell amongst you. Now, making for Hashem a mikdash can't merely mean the actual physical construction only, because it is very clear at the beginning of the Parsha that the requests were for personal contributions. It wasn't just about the building materials, it was about who was contributing them, or that each member of Klal Yisrael was a part of this process. The second half of the pasuk really comes as a result of that. What he explains is if each of us make room for Hashem in our lives, if we create an opening for a place for Hashem to dwell, then in return, v'shachanti b'socham, Hashem will be close to us. He will be in close proximity to us. What does it mean to make room for Hashem? It means to sacrifice, to give up something, to perhaps be involved in a mitzvah, even if it's not what's popular opinion, or even if it's hard for us personally. But when we make that sacrifice, and we make that room for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to dwell amongst us, then in return, He does. And I wanted to share with you a beautiful place where I think we can show an example of this, also in this week's Parsha. That's back to the Atzei Shitim. Many ask, where did Bnei Yisrael get this wood from? And the most common answer is that, in fact, Klal Yisrael got this wood from Mitzrayim. Yaakov Avinu planted the wood many years earlier, and on their way out, Bnei Yisrael took the wood with them. The Ibn Ezra, however, asks very compelling questions on this idea. And he says, okay, well, what exactly did Bnei Yisrael think the purpose of this wood was going to be? I mean, we're not talking about something they can stick in their bag. It's not a precious gem or a precious stone. These are big tree trunks that they were carrying out with them. And he said, and furthermore, can you imagine what this would look like to the Mitzrim? The Mitzrim give them permission to leave for a few days, and they're like, we just want a 3-day vacation, and on their way out, they're carrying these large chunk of trees. And imagine if the Mitzrim were to turn to them and say, I'm sorry, why do you need all of this wood for your 3-day vacation? What would Klal Yisrael answer them then? So the Ibn Ezra says, Im Kabbalah, however, if the approach that really these trees were something that Yaakov Avinu planted and brought out was something that was passed down via Kabbalah, so we'll leave the story at that. He said, however, if al derech svara, this opinion comes al derech svara, he says, I'd like to offer another opinion. And the Ibn Ezra shares that, in fact, when Klal Yisrael got to Har Sinai, and they camped there, there was a small forest nearby. And when they were told that they were going to need to remain there for a certain amount of time, for longer than a short time, they cut down those trees and created homes for themselves. Fast forward to the time when Moshe makes the announcement that each individual is supposed to contribute to the Mikdash, and Moshe asks for Atzei Shitim, the very wood that is used as the foundation, or the entire foundation, of the homes of Klal Yisrael. And Klal Yisrael pause for a minute, and then they run home, dismantle their homes, and bring that wood as their personal contribution to the Mishkan. And in return, the Ibn Ezra says that the Anan hadn't come down to protect Bnei Yisrael yet, or hadn't come down to be with Bnei Yisrael yet. That only happens post the Mishkan. And he says, the Asuli Mikdash, they, Bnei Yisrael, I'm kind of combining the two now. When Bnei Yisrael made room for Hashem, they brought the very foundation of their homes to Hashem. Hashem in return, V'shachanti b'socham, was the presence amongst them. And so to us, when we make room for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our lives, that enables us to feel the relationship that we have with Him even closer. Good Shabbos.